My name is Bill Wolff. I'm the Executive Director of LaSalle School here in Albany. And I am absolutely thrilled that there's so many people here today that responded to this. The planning committee that worked on this a few months ago, we kind of scratched our heads and we were thinking about using what room we might want to use, and if we'd get enough people for Page Hall. We thought, geez, I guess, we'd need 100 or so to go into Page Hall. And I'm not sure how many of you know it, but as of yesterday, I think there were 425 people registered for this. Yeah, that's really, really terrific. Thank you. I want to say thanks to the many sponsors of this. Certainly the University of Albany and School of Social Welfare. They've got they've got the space. They've got the space. They got the brains, that's for sure. They've got lots of staff that can help with this kind of thing, and it all made it possible to come to this site. The Counseling Center at LaSalle School, that's a new venture that LaSalle has underway. The LaSalle School Foundation, through the generosity of board members of the LaSalle Foundation, all of the expenses associated with this event have been underwritten. The Kafka School of Excellence, or the Kafka Center for Excellence. Kafka is the Council of Family and Child Caring Agencies. That's a statewide association, about 130 members of child and family serving agencies throughout the state. Their representatives and leadership are here today, and we're really, really pleased for their assistance. And of course, the reason that we're doing this, why LaSalle has undertaken this, is this is our 160th anniversary. We've been in business up the street since 1854. The lights have never gone out on that campus since prior to the Civil War, and that's really remarkable. And that's not unlike a number of the agencies that are in this region. Child and family providing agencies such as Parsons, formerly known as the Albany Home for Children. I think they're in the room someplace, but I believe they're maybe 190th anniversary. Vanderheiden Hall, 180 years of service. St. Anne Institute, 130 or so. St. Catherine's, 130. That's really remarkable. I mean, you find that kind of thing sometimes in some of the largest cities in the United States, but to be upstate in an area like we are, to have that kind of density of agencies with such a breadth of expertise, and who have survived for that long, also means that they are collectively, as a group, all open to change, all open to doing things new and in different ways. And they have, if I'm going to say this in a way that's a little bit interesting, but basically our agencies like that have survived because of the resiliency, tremendous resiliency of children and families. You all know that. That's why you're here. And you all want to learn new ways of working with those kids to take advantage, and their families, to take advantage of those inherent strengths that they have. Incredible stuff. We want to be doing the right thing, and we want to be doing more of the right thing, and I think that's what's motivated many of us to be here today, and that's certainly why LaSalle School has taken the interest in this. But I want to say, LaSalle has nothing exclusive on this at all. We're one of many, many terrific partners working together with a place like the university and our friends in county and court and all over the place that really are interested in finding better ways of working with kids and their families. So that's what this is about. I want to take a moment or two and talk about some really important stuff. We have graduate students here. A number of them are around. I don't know exactly how you'll pick them out, but they'll be trying to help you. They don't have little signs that say, "May I help you?" We're not quite like that, but they are here to help direct you around. If you have questions, they'll try to make themselves visible, to you. There's 4 or 5 of them that can help navigate this place. It's kind of a confusing building, of course. And I sure wouldn't want to walk around here in the dark. I can hardly get out of here when the lights are on. So that's a complicated place. The bathrooms, they're all over the place. Whereabouts are they? They're, down the hall and to the right, okay? Down the hall and to the left and up and, That's the dean. The dean knows where every bathroom is in this place. But you'll have help. If you need any help, please ask. You'll get there. Wi-Fi, we've been asking about this. We want this right up there. It's UA Guest. The password is Blizzard. We had nothing to do with that. I hear the IT people here at the university have at least some sense of humor, and maybe we're trying to help us to divert the Blizzard elsewhere, and it seemed to have worked. So we'll go with that. PowerPoints. The other materials, this is being videotaped. It will be all available, at least on our website at www. You got it there. And then I think the university will be posting things too, and you'll be able to pick up some of the material afterwards. Some of the handouts, some of the presentations also have handouts. Lunch and snacks. Lunch is provided. It's a box lunch. There's no real one place for everybody to eat. You'll have to spread around. There's directions outside on where to go and pick up those box lunches, but it's a grab and go. There's a variety of stuff, turkey, roast beef, vegetarian items like that. If you really need to, the cafeteria on site is open. You can purchase a meal there if you like. And ask them for some directions as to where that is, but that's not going to be a problem for you to find. So, but we do have 400 or so box lunches that you can get quickly. And I want to thank the planning committee. A lot of members came together on some conference calls to put that together, and I already mentioned our sponsors. This is the overview of the day, roughly. We're going to try to stick very close to this schedule. We've got what I'm doing right now, the welcoming and announcements. At 9:15, we've got Susan coming to start with us. We'll be introducing Susan here in a couple minutes. We'll take a break. We come back with a presentation by Dave Wallace. Then we take a break for lunch. We got a presentation by Mary Size and a panel and question and answer. So everything's happening in this room. There's no breakouts. There's no traveling around. You don't have to worry about too much. We'll get you out of here by 4 o'clock with no problem, and we recognize some of you have traveled a long ways to get here. We know how that goes, but the 2:15 panel is going to be really terrific, experienced providers, and it's really opening up for a great dialogue there too. So please stay and throughout the day. And let me see, Heather, guys, how am I doing, Heather? You're nodding your head, but you're not looking at me. Have I covered everything pretty well, you think, for now? Yes. Okay, all right. As again, I said, it's a great pleasure to do this. I think that this material, this information about trauma and about response to trauma and the brain neurology tells us two things. It gives us some tremendous tools to work with children and families who we come in contact with. It gives us new ways of understanding, sort of what happened to kids and why things are the way they are sometimes in these families. And it gives us, like I said, a set of tools to respond differently to them. The other thing I think it does is it motivates us even more to say, let's invest all we can to help prevent these kinds of things for as many kids and families as possible. It's a lot easier to divert this kind of stuff that we see than it is to deal with it later on. If you had a choice, we showed a video last night up at the school, and one of the questions in the choice was if you had the opportunity to decide when you would intervene, would you intervene with a 16-year-old or would you intervene with a 3- and a 4-year-old? And we know the answer to that. So why wait? This helps us craft some of what we need to be doing with children and families early on. I think we're there. So I'm going to introduce the Dean of the School of Social Welfare here, Dr. Catherine Breyer-Lawson. Kathy is well known to us all in this community, a tremendous, tremendous advocate for not only this university and its programs, but its students, the work of the community, and a national figure and a national powerhouse. And it's such a good thing to be working with someone like this that engages us and so many of you so easily. So Catherine, come on up, would you?
Thank you. Well, welcome to all of you. What a historic moment for us to have what we thought would be a crowd of maybe 50 to 100, to have over 425 here today. It's thrilling, and I think that the momentum that is building will be accelerated by our keynote speaker. And it's my privilege to introduce to you Susan Dreyfus, who many of you already know as President and CEO of the Alliance for Children and Families. She's also well known for her leadership in public sector agencies, and she served as secretary for the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services, and has also served in the leadership roles in Wisconsin for Tommy Thompson, And so her knowledge of both the public and nonprofit sector is deep and wide, where she is overseeing Medicaid, aging, long-term care, child welfare, behavioral health, juvenile justice, economic assistance, and other human services. She also has served as the Senior Vice President and COO for both Families International and the Alliance for Children and Families. And in many of her leadership roles, she's known not just as a change agent, but a spearhead for transformational systems reform. And in that way, she has been identified as a major resource for a number of organizations where she's been an elected member, for instance, of the Leadership 18 Executive Committee. It's a coalition of CEOs from the largest and most respected nonprofit organizations in this country. She is also part of a 12-member national commission to eliminate child abuse and neglect fatalities, and she was appointed by John Boehner, our Speaker of the House of Representatives. We know Susan as a wonderful friend, advocate, an international and historic leader, and it's our greatest privilege to have her here to help us build our own movement, build a strategic vision and plan, to go deeper with the brain science as it links to what we understand about trauma, as well as resilience and recovery. And she's going to be talking with us about the national perspectives on local practice and policies and how we can capitalize on our strengths, on the science, particularly the brain science, and core values. So it's the greatest honor to welcome her and to give her the stage. So please give her a warm welcome.
I'm going to start down here with you this morning, and I'm going to head up to the stage where I'll go through some slides with you and some conversation. But I want to first start off, and I want to recognize Bill Wolff and LaSalle School. I get the distinct honor of being able to travel around the country and see the best of America's nonprofit human-serving organizations. And you notice I said human-serving. I didn't say human services, did I? Because our sector is more than providers of programs and services under contract with others. We are leaders, we are partners, we are advocates, we are innovators. We bring community into the conversation. We are a unique sector with unique strengths and unique purposes within society today. And I want to thank LaSalle School for hosting and wanting to be a part of this, making this happen for you today. And one of the best things I get to see too around the country is when you have a strong university partner. Kathy, thank you. When you have a strong university partner within your communities, really great things start to happen. And so one of the things I just want to quickly read to you is off LaSalle's website, something that I think frames up well our conversation here today, and my 57-year-old eyes need these, because I can't see it otherwise. Within the therapeutic relationships, we strive to create lasting change. It is possible because children and their families experience stability, build upon their strengths, and find reasons to be confident and optimistic about their futures. Cass Sussman, behavioral economist out of Harvard, says it best when he says people have to see their future self. Abraham Lincoln, and when you read his writings about poverty, he said basically the poor have to experience, I'd say all people, but that's what the president would have said back then in the 1860s. He said the poor have to experience success to believe there's a future they can influence. I've had responsibility for child welfare in 2 states, and I've been doing this work a long time, like so many of you have been. And one of my aha moments just recently here, I've been doing this work a long time, and I say this to you because we're never done learning. We're never done having our own aha moments of deeper insight, deeper understanding. And one of the things that hit me square between the eyes here a while back when our country started wrestling with this issue in child welfare of child well-being. What is it? How do we measure it? And all of a sudden I had my little aha moment and realized the experience of safety and permanency every day in a child's life is inherent in their sense of well-being. Do you see what I'm saying? the experience. It isn't an ultimate outcome. It isn't an ultimate destination. It is an experience, a day-to-day experience of stability, of safety, of permanency that is inherent in a child's sense of well-being. So I want to start off today and I want to ask you a question. What is a healthy capital district? What is a healthy capital district? Do you see it? Do you each see your relevance to it? One of the beauties of last night's dinner that we had is that sitting in that room were people from every field, every sector, every discipline. Because this is now about a larger shared responsibility and larger shared vision for what is a healthy capital district. Do you share common goals, beliefs, and values upon which you will achieve those goals? Do you understand that you are all accountable as individuals, as organizations, and collectively as a community and across all sectors? Do you understand that the path forward to your vision will require deep change and the spirit of collaborating widely and partnering deeply? Do you see it? Do you own it? Are you willing to think anew? If I told you, you will need to confront many assumptions, long-held assumptions, about what you thought you knew, what you thought you did that was best, that you were going to have to think through what you're currently doing and change in order to achieve a healthy capital district, because vision is all about change. Vision is all about change. Folks, you are poised to lead the nation. And I don't just say that lightly to anyone around the country. You are poised to lead the nation. All stars are aligning for you. To lead the nation in understanding that there is nothing more valuable in America than its human capital. You want a strong economy? You want employers to want to come to New York and set up businesses and good paying jobs? You want the education system to succeed? You want a healthy capital district? It begins with your human capital. And this state seems to be understanding that. This relationship here in the capital district between the university and these partnering agencies, you're on to something. But it's going to require you to go through some times of some ambiguity and some chaos and some challenge and some change to have that healthy capital district. So I want to ask you just very quickly here in the room, I'm just going to pick out a couple people, so get ready. What is a healthy capital district? What would it look like? What would be happening in the capital district if you thought to yourself, it is healthy? And remember, only 10% of your health is predicated on your primary care. When I say healthy, I'm not just talking physical health, right? I'm talking about the broadest definition of health that you can envision. So what would it look like? What would it look like?
Intact families.
Intact families. All right. What would it look like?
Emotionally stable people.
Emotionally stable. You ever thought about that?
Funding for preventive and services, mental health services.
The system would be more front end, right? And you would
Channeled more into services to provide to kids and families.
What would it look like economically? Anybody have a thought? What would it look like economically, a healthy capital district?
More jobs, full-time,
More full-time jobs. Other thoughts? What would it look like?
equality.
Equality, equity. I will tell you, thank you so much. I will tell you that as you move into what is a healthy capital district, you can't have the conversation if you don't start having the conversation about equity. And we'll all be talking about that in just a few minutes.
Safe, clean streets where you can walk at any time of the day.
Absolutely. Safe, clean streets where you can walk every day. Okay, I'm going to run over here real quick, and then I'm going to go up to the stage. Okay. What is a healthy capital district?
I know it. Better education for our children.
Better education for our children, for all children to succeed in education.
Clean air and the environment.
You see what's happening? Do you see what all goes in to a healthy capital district? right? It may not be some of the things that maybe you initially thought of when you came here today thinking about quote-unquote social services in order to achieve this vision.
Networks of resources, identified resources, and, as you said, equality and provision of services.
I'll tell you, the currency of the day is network, bar none. The more you're working in networks, the stronger and the more successful you're going to be. Any other thoughts about a healthy capital district?
No more gun violence?
No more gun violence. So again, what you're hearing here, think of just in the conversation in this room that just happened, the number of fields, sectors, disciplines that are all critically important to achieve your vision of a healthy capital district. So today, I'm going to walk you through not the specifics about ACEs. You're all going to hear enough about that, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Science. But what I want to do today is help you with a sense of a roadmap of what does it look like when you can infuse, align, and accelerate the ACE science and move from program thinking to systems change thinking in order to achieve what you just laid out for me, which is your definition of a healthy capital district. So I've developed my own 21st century theory of change, and I want to share this with you because I think it helps to frame our conversation today. If you want to enjoy prosperity, we must foster the health and well-being of all people. As we just got done hearing today, a healthy people is critical to a strong economic development strategy that a governor, a legislator, a mayor, a county executive, the business sector is wanting to have. You can't have one without the other. That as leaders, we must articulate a clear and compelling vision, create a culture for innovation and partnership, and practice adaptive leadership skills. I've become a student over the years of Dr. Ron Heifetz from the Harvard Kennedy School. And one of the things that I'll tell you, and I think we all know this, in whatever walk of life that you have today, one of the things that we know is that whenever things become ambiguous, whenever things become challenging, our first inclination as human beings, it's just human nature, is to try to find the first technical fix we can to fix something and get on with it. But what we're dealing with in our country right now, from the standpoint of wanting that healthy capital region, we're dealing with an adaptive challenge. And the answers in front of us are not technical and are not quick fixes. The answers in front of us mean that we've got to constantly asking ourselves, what are we currently doing that we've got to keep doing because it works? What do we have to rearrange and change because we simply know more now and we know that we can do it differently and better, and we got to rearrange it? What is it we have to shed? Talk about challenge. Folks, there's things that you're doing today. There's things in your policy, whether it's in law enforcement, whether it's in education, whether it's in the human serving sector, wherever, there are things you're doing today that as the science informs our work, we have to stop doing. And then we have to have the conversation, what is it that we need to do that is brand new? So what is it we keep? What is it we rearrange? What is it that we shed? And what is it that has to be brand new? And I will tell you, we are our biggest barrier. We are our biggest barrier to achieving this. We must move from program thinking, what we do, to systems change thinking, what we achieve. And we have to understand that we are all part of larger systems, and just because you have a great program doesn't mean that you're helping to create a healthier capital district. And that the only way to achieve the outcomes we strive for is ultimately, it's being able to see yourself and be seen as relevant to reducing the number of people in this country who are living in poverty, to increasing the number of people who are able to live healthy and safe lives. And as I said to you before, your health is only predicated 10% on your physical health. The rest are these environmental and social determinants of health, and you simply cannot bend the cost curve of health care in your state or in the capital district. You simply cannot have a healthier population if you don't understand and embrace this neurobiopsychosocial intersection of health. Remember, 5% of the population is driving 50% of your Medicaid expenditures. And if you do what we did out in Washington State using data analytics and looking deep within the lives of that 5%, you find the perfect storm of biopsychosocial variables. So simply, you cannot be successful without understanding and embracing the whole person within the context of family and within the context of neighborhood, and putting more people onto pathways for education and employment success. Someone raised back here the issue of equity. Right there, therein lies what we find in our country in terms of inequity, and therein lies what I think are the critical answers to equity. Reduce poverty, increase safety and health, and put more people onto pathways for educational and employment success. You do not have to be an education agency. You do not have to be an employment and training agency. You do not have to be the healthcare delivery system, and you do not have to be an anti-poverty agency to be absolutely relevant in your practice and in your day-to-day policy on all four of what I think are the critical things that we've got to be about. When Governor Gregoire asked me to join her out in Washington State, I said one thing to her in her office. I said, Governor, I'd be honored to come out here and serve you, but I've been doing this work a long time, and I'm tired of trying to make programs and services within larger field systems work. And if ultimately we are not about those things, then let us not waste one another's time bringing me out here to do this work, because this is what ultimately it has to be about. This will require us to move. Oh, I missed something here. Sorry. Here we go. This will require us to move from a linear and transactional mindset to a dynamic and transformational view across systems and sectors. Social theorists call this causes of causes, risks of risks, but it will require us to move from the linear and the transactional to the dynamic and the transformative. But therein lies, too, some real answers I hope we talk about here today. And share accountability for the alignment of mutual policy, goals, and values across systems and sectors for collective impact that none of us can achieve alone. One of the greatest things that's happening out of this great recession, which has been hard. In just 2.5 years in Washington State, I had to oversee the reduction of expenditures across all of our health and social service programs of over $4 billion. Absolutely painful. But there's something that I see coming out of this great recession that I think history will judge us all on as leaders. And everybody in this room is a leader. Everybody in this room shares accountability and responsibility for achieving that healthy capital district region that you envision. And one of the things I think history is going to judge us on is, did we truly embrace this notion of shared governance, shared responsibility, shared accountability, that we don't otherize anymore and say, well, that's their job, or that's their job, or I don't do that, that's their job. Oh, no. Now it's time for this notion of shared accountability, but it also means that we've got to embrace something I'm going to talk to you today about, and it is this authenticity of engagement. Folks that you now call your clients, from this day forward, I'm going to ask you all here to lead the nation in calling them what they are, your neighbors. Your neighbors. I think there is something really inherent in this notion of shared governance that isn't just about us as systems and policies and sectors. It's about us within the deepest sense of our neighbors within our communities and their sense of engagement and participation and authentic inclusion in all that we talk about day in and day out, and how we're going to create that healthy capital district. At the Harvard Center for a Networked World, I've been involved with a number of years with a group of public sector leaders. New York has been visible in this work over the last, we started it in 2009 or 10. And we've started this work, what we call the generative curve, the human services value curve. And we're trying to move human services from the regulative to the generative. So you see the regulative down here, you see the generative moving up. And let me give you an idea of what starts to happen within systems and communities. As you move along this generative curve, there are actually now public sector strategic plans that are all written around moving from the regulative to the generative. But I'm going to plain talk this just a little bit so I can move through it. Regulative, the buses are running on time. Not literally. Regulative means it's what you do. Eligibility determination processes are working. People need a program or service, they apply for it, they get it. People need a Section 8 voucher, we get that Section 8 voucher. People need access to Medicaid, we go through the application process and voila, they're on Medicaid. Whatever, whatever. But this basically means in the regulative state, the buses, the trains are running on time. When you get to the collaborative state, it means, yes, we're on time, but there's some coordination that's going on. Right? So now it's what we did. People are eligible for services, they get them, and we connected this and that, but whether or not the connection really happened, we don't know, but we made a good referral. But it's more in this state of being collaborative, on time, coordinated, basically for greater efficiency. Not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. And then we move to the integrative. What results, but basically point in time, are we achieving? They're on time, they're coordinated, and they're achieving program outcomes. Okay? So when you're in that integrative state, you're on time, people are getting what they need, they're coordinated, and now you can start talking about achieving programmatic outcomes that we all have our own responsibilities for. But then there's the generative. Then there's what we're visioning as the real North Star, because look, when you look at what's happening with public sector dollars right now, we are on an unsustainable course. When you look what's happening at the federal level, we're not going to come back from the Great Recession and go back to the way we were. We've got to come out of this thing as a different nation. And part of this is understanding that we've got to move to this generative space in our human service work and understand that now we've got to be talking about population change. Now we've got to be talking about impact. Now we've got to be talking about fewer children in this country living in poverty and feeling and understanding a shared accountability that until we see that measurement change, we're not getting the work done. Until more people are living healthy and safe lives, all very measurable. Until more people are on pathways for education and employment success, all very measurable. We're not done. That's where you are when you're in this generative state. So we're working across public and nonprofit sectors right now with the Harvard Center for a Networked World to move along this human services value curve. And I share this with you because I think it's a way for us to think about what I want to talk to you now about, and that is how do we start thinking about this ACE science? How do we start thinking about this science? Think of the medical sector. The minute science starts to shift, published articles, right? And all of a sudden, and Jack Shonkoff at the Harvard Center for the Developing Child says it best when he uses the example of cancer, and he goes back many years and then he transcends it forward and talks about how cancer treatment as it was thought about 50 years ago and the way it is today, all based upon the evolving sciences. But folks, in our world, those of us that are committed in this human serving world, we don't tend to make the same progressions forward as the science changes. And when you look at this ACE science, children who have experienced adverse childhood experiences, adults, and I'm going to really implore you today to take a two-generational view to this issue. Do not just look at this from a prevention, early childhood stance, critically important, but you've got to infuse this and accelerate this science across your adult serving systems as well. But one of the things that's so important with this ACE science is that we understand that at its core, and something I'm going to be really stressing today, is that we have got to be thinking about not just the prevention of ACEs, critically important, and just a few ACEs, just for those of you that might not know what they are. Things like a child living in a household with a person living with mental illness, a child living in a household with someone that's been incarcerated, a child who has experienced, witnessed domestic violence, a child who's experienced abuse or neglect. And I remind you, please remember, the abuse and neglect in this country, in New York, is no different, is not those horrific cases of abuse that we read about, and they are horrible and they are terrible, and there was no worse day in my life as a child welfare director than when a child was killed by abuse and neglect. But remember, 70% of abuse and neglect in America is neglect. And when you study those cases, what you will find time and time and time again is the chronic day-to-day stresses of poverty. A child living in a household of 4 with an income under $15,000 is 22 times more likely to be maltreated than a child living in a household with an income over $30,000. Poverty does not cause maltreatment of children. I have seen too many parents living in poverty do one heck of a job raising great kids. But the day-to-day stresses of poverty are a high correlate to child maltreatment. And so I'm hoping what you all see today is that this ACE science and how it aligns across these systems, across our practice, across our policy, not just in human services, but in education, in law enforcement, in healthcare delivery. Because at the end of the day, if you are a person with high ACEs, there has been a rewiring of your brain. There has been the inability for you to form the executive functioning skills that so many of our current practices and programs assume people have. And when you understand, which to me was my aha moment in this out in Washington State, it was the alignment of the ACE science with the executive function science, the prefrontal cortex development, where I could see time and time again how many of our programs and services were absolutely missing the boat, and oftentimes with the best of intentions, making things worse, not necessarily better. So how do we move ACEs to scale? And I'm going to give you some examples today through leadership, through organizations, through policy and practice, how we move the adverse childhood experiences science to scale across systems, across sectors, across disciplines, across fields, in our policy and in our practice as organizations, as individual leaders, and collectively as a larger community. Leadership matters. It absolutely matters. Everyone here, as I said before, is a leader. And one of the things that is critical is you cannot just be the smartest person in the room on this science. You have to have a head and you have to have a heart for the work. One of the things that I always look at in people that are involved in policy and practice in these systems is whether or not you're spending any time in the field, whether or not you're spending any time in the homes and in the lives of the very people that we believe our practices and our policies are meant to serve. Leadership matters. And the difference I find are those values-driven leaders that have both a head and a heart connection to the larger work and the larger goals they want to be a part of. These are leaders that listen musically and think analytically. What does that mean? What that means is, let's just take, for instance, that I'm in child welfare. And I don't know who in this room is involved in the child welfare system, or for a minute that I'm in law enforcement, or for a minute that I'm an educator. It's real easy to stay focused on my part of the work. But when you are a leader that listens musically and thinks analytically, you now are thinking about your work within the context. If I'm law enforcement, I'm thinking about my work within the context of early childhood development. If I'm a person, I'm involved in the healthcare delivery system, I'm thinking about my work within the context of how critically important we know the science tells us are the first 2,000 days of these little babies' lives. You're listening musically and you're thinking analytically about not just what you do and what's in front of you day in and day out, but how it interfaces and has to move across these larger systems. You are disruptive by nature. Welcome to the productive zone of disequilibrium, as Ron Heifetz calls it. You're living on what feels like that edge of chaos. And folks, here's the reality. Here is the reality. You will not find your greatest creative strength, either individually as leaders or collectively as a community. It simply isn't possible to find your greatest creative strength without going through the seas of ambiguity, of uncertainty. It simply is not possible. And yet we're all trying and realize that the #1 leadership asset we need right now, I believe, and the IBM Global Enterprise of the Future report stated, the #1 leadership trait in the 21st century is creativity. And we simply can't get there without this notion of ambiguity and what feels like oftentimes living on this edge of chaos, as so much of what we've always known and thought as leaders is being disrupted and challenged and forcing us to think differently. This notion of distributed leadership, it no longer is enough to be the leader setting the stage of what's going to happen, whether you're the governor, whether you're the legislature, whether you're mayor, the county executive, whether you're the CEO of LaSalle, you're the dean of the school. It now is about distributed leadership, shared governance, a very different way to lead. I just got done doing work for the state of Michigan, where we helped them create their pay-for-performance model in their child welfare system. It was the most inclusive process of transparency, of engagement, of honesty across fields and sectors and disciplines, as together we led a task force process that gave Governor Snyder what he was so delighted for, an actual implementation pathway forward with a sense of shared ownership and responsibility by the key players that are going to be critical to its success. This does not happen by chance. This happens by intensive discipline, and it happens by design. And then lastly, with Leadership Matters, educate and engage, and then, as I say, repeat, 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 right? It's all about plain talking this science, plain talking what it is that you envision as this healthy capital district. And today, as we talk about this science and its alignment, it's real easy to be up here with the scientists, and when you're with, and you talk, and people, what are they talking about? We've got to plain talk this science so that people understand that at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is assure that this country has the critical human capital that it must have to be strong, to be vital, to be economically successful. We can leave no one behind. And that if we're going to stop the 2-generational transfer, something that is driving the costs and the lost human potential in this country is this generational transfer of these issues. And that if we're going to solve some of society's toughest problems, we simply can't do it without recognizing that this science plays an integral role in getting this job done. Organizational hardwiring. And I've got some great examples here that I want to share with you on this. And the first thing I want to talk about is what's going on right now with data sharing and data analytics, which I contend is our next frontier. I don't believe you as a state yet. I've got to believe that you're not going to be far behind the other states that are already doing this, you're not yet tracking at a population level the adverse childhood experience scores of your citizens. In Washington State, we were fortunate. We were a leader in the nation. I think now like 20+ states now do this through the behavioral risk factor survey done by your Department of Health, I'm assuming in the state of New York, is through what's called BRFIS, that behavioral risk factor survey. States are now capturing the ACE scores of their populations. We do what we measure. And if we don't have a measurement to move, the reality is things don't happen and don't get done. But it isn't just about measurement, it is about this notion of data analytics. And I'm going to give you a quick example. In Washington State, I had responsibility for the TANF program, the Welfare to Work program called Work First. And one of the things that was quite clear to me after being embedded in this science, especially the executive function science around the prefrontal cortex development, is I realized that we had to move from participation that counts, keeping the feds happy. We had to move from participation that counts to engagement that matters, and we had to get underneath getting people onto pathways out of poverty. Now, there was no way to do that until we used data analytics and we truly studied the cases of the people in our TANF program. What we found is we were using a one-size-fits-all case management model. We were using a one-size-fits-all assessment model. We thought as long as you got to work, we were successful. We weren't asking any questions about how the children were. And we certainly weren't thinking about whether or not people were truly not just working, but were on pathways out of poverty. Using data analytics, we found that we had 5 very different types of people in our program. There were some people we were doing way too much for. They needed very little. They were self-motivated, it was situational, they needed very little from us, but we threw everything at them but the kitchen sink, and I think made it worse. We had other people that needed very intensive case management, but the other thing that we realized is across all of them, we had to engage people in a very different way. One of the things I'll challenge you with today is to think about, when you think about this science and you think about the executive functioning and the prefrontal cortex development and the influence that adverse childhood experiences has had on that developing brain. One of the things I would also tell you, whether you're in education, whether you're in healthcare, whether you're in law enforcement, whether you're in child welfare, juvenile justice, mental health, bring down the adversarial nature of your systems. Bring down the adversarial nature of your systems, because one of the things we realized using our data analytical work is that we were using a case management model that just simply did not fit. And one of the greatest things we did was align motivational interviewing across the entire system as being a critical way that we were going to help people build those pathways out of poverty. As I said before, people experiencing success to believe there's a future they can influence. And this notion of data sharing, data analytics, stop hiding behind HIPAA, stop hiding behind the idea that data can't be shared. I got to tell you, as a secretary, as long as I kept asking the why questions, I found a way under, around, over, and through any of the confidentiality issues people were putting up in our way while still honoring and respecting people's right to confidentiality. There are ways for us to share this data. There are ways for us to look at the whole person within the context of family, within the context of community, and not just see them in the siloed ways in which we do today. Because you cannot achieve a healthy capital district until there is this cross-system work that's going on, and data sharing is critical to that being done. I'm going to keep moving us forward here. One of the, let's see if I want to focus on any of that. No, I don't think so. I'm going to move us here. So I want to talk a little bit about practice. Because as I said before, if you're going to infuse, align, and accelerate the ACEs, you've got to look at it from a leadership perspective, You've got to look at it from an organizational perspective, the own organizations that you are running, as well as the interface with others. And you've got to look at it from a practice perspective as well. One of the things I always say is it's not done until it's every person, every time. That has to be our goal. And practitioners need a broader context for the importance and the impact of their work beyond programmatic outcomes. One of my greatest aha moments in my world was when I was in Wisconsin, and I was there for the birth of Wraparound Milwaukee. Everybody knows Wraparound Milwaukee, and Wraparound Milwaukee was, at that time, it was viewed as a program for replication. Well, we had our epiphany when we were reforming the child welfare system in Milwaukee and doing our work with aging and long-term care and doing our work with developmental disabilities, when we realized, no. Wraparound is not a methodology. At its heart is an orientation of values and a practice approach that are relevant across all human serving programs. And when you see and understand that, a lot of this comes to life for you, because it's in this notion of wraparound, this authenticity of engagement, the values of what really is a system of care for persons, whether they live with disability, whether they live with persistent mental illness, whether they are trying to move their lives forward through your welfare program, whatever. It's when we as practitioners understand that this thing we call wraparound, this thing we call systems of care, whatever we call it, is not simply a methodology. It is an orientation. It's a way of thinking about our work and thinking about those that we serve. We can talk about this all till the sun don't shine, but if contracts and budgets don't align to the practice that we're saying we want to have, it won't happen. So what do I mean by that? And I think your county, if I'm remembering correctly, Bill, the county here has done some wonderful work of thinking about this, about ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Science, and how to align it contractually for organizations. But if we don't understand that what we basically have right now is we're asking one thing, but our contracts and our budgeting basically produce something else. We have transactional approaches to contracts and budget. We thwart creativity every step we get, every chance we get. And I can say that because I've been a public sector leader, I've been a county government leader, I've been a leader in 2 different states. I know how it works. We have best of intentions on the public sector side. But oftentimes, the way in which we contract thwarts creativity. It thwarts bigger outcomes. It thwarts the ability for cross systems to work together. And please understand, I am all about evidence-based practice, but evidence-based practice, evidence-based programs should be viewed as a starting point, not the destination. So contracts and budgets have to be aligned in order to take ACEs to scale. Practice must be aligned to the science, person, family-centered, and strengths-based engagement values. Here's where I just have to repeat this one more time. In all of my years in this work, and I'm sure with you too, one of the things that I have gotten to absolutely believe is the key. We can do everything better, smarter, faster, cheaper. We can figure out what the science is and how we're going to align it to our practice and policy. We can align it to our contracts and our budget. If we do not practice what I think is both an art and an absolute skill of, as I talked about before, this authenticity of engagement with people, with our neighbors, not just our clients, that we cannot get this work done, because it is in that active engagement that I believe we are giving people the opportunity to demonstrate their value and their worth. Greatest example, out in Washington State with our TANF program. As I told you before, we moved motivational interviewing to scale across all of our case managers in our Work First program. And I had an email, I was in on a Sunday, and I was going through my email, and I got an email from one of our case managers in the field, and I thought it was really cute. She said, Secretary Dreyfus, I'm not sure if you even see your own email, and I'm like there for 4 hours going through email on a Sunday. It's like, yeah, I see my own email. And she said, I don't know if you see your own email, but she says, I'm writing to you to thank you for this training on motivational interviewing. She said, I've been doing this work, I think she'd been with us over 10 years. And she said, I want to tell you the story because stories matter. She said, I want to tell you the story about Jennifer. She said, Jennifer and I have been working together for probably about 4 years. She has been coming in and out of the program. As soon as we get her a job, things are going great, she's back again. We do it again, and we do it again. And she and I have been clashing like this, right? I'm assessing what she needs to do. I'm telling her what she damn well better do. She's dotting her I's, crossing her T's. We get her a job, and the next thing we know, 6 months later, she's back. So this caseworker was trained in motivational interviewing and started using motivational interviewing techniques with Jennifer. What does that mean? Authentic engagement, right? It meant understanding what Jennifer's hopes, dreams, and aspirations were for herself and for her family. It meant assessing Jennifer in a much broader context with her, not to her. And it meant developing a plan for her life that Jennifer felt the strongest sense of participation and ownership for. All of a sudden, Jennifer starts hitting all of her targets. Jennifer, it's like this different person starts emerging for this case manager. And please don't underestimate the vastness of the issues that Jennifer faced in her life, because they were very real. So the case manager said to Jennifer, after Jennifer was like doing so well, hitting all of her goals, was just so motivated and moving forward, and the caseworker said to her, Jennifer, you and I had been fighting and hassling with each other, and you've been in and out of this program for years. What happened? You know what Jennifer said? She looked at her and she said, this is what, I have this in a quote, "This is the first time you ever listened to me. This is the first time you ever listened to me." Policy. Everybody in this room is a policy maker. Everyone. There's big P policy and there's little p policy. And what I find time and time again is when people think about systems change, moving from program thinking to systems change thinking, right? Something that all of you want to see, because what you laid out for a healthy capital district, to me, is going to have to be moving from program thinking to systems change thinking, right? And really understanding that at the core of what you're trying to achieve for your healthy capital district is the strong health and vitality and prosperity of all people. One of the things that's really important is to understand that big P policy is not just sitting with your governor and your legislature, your county executive and your county boards, your mayors and your city councils. That's easy. That's easy to say policy is for somebody else. You are all policymakers. You are all setting policy every day, whether it's with the individual person that you're working with, whether it's within the organizations that you lead or that you work for. You've got to see this infusing, aligning, and accelerating as a shared responsibility, and that you are all policymakers, and you are all advocates every day. Advocacy is not a four-letter word. Absolutely is not. It is critically important in our country that we all understand that going back to our founding fathers, where these roots of advocacy and voice are critically important. And so one of the things I hope that you do is you think about continuously aligning all policies across child and adult programs and interfacing systems to the ACE science and toxic stress mitigation. What do I mean by that? One of the things that I'd point you to is something that is recently coming out of the Harvard Center for the Developing Child, Dr. Jack Shonkoff. And if you really want to do yourselves something you'll really enjoy, go to the Harvard Center for the Developing Child website and read their articles. Read their articles. I think they have 11 or 12 of them out right now. They're all fabulous, and they give you such an understanding and awareness of the alignment of this science to our work and to our policy. But I want to read to you from Dr. Jack Shonkoff in a recent article that he wrote about poverty reduction. Jack is convinced that two-generational poverty reduction in our country, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen through the executive functioning science. It's going to happen when we understand that it is in this prefrontal cortex development, whether that's in our child development work or in our adult serving systems, that we understand ways that we give people the opportunity to experience, remember I said that before, to experience success, to exercise, to experience and exercise those prefrontal cortex skills, executive function. Jack believes it's critical to two-generational poverty reduction, and let me read this to you. And I want to plain talk this. And I want you to think about what it's going to take for us to move through two-generational poverty. These skills, these executive functioning skills, include the ability to focus and sustain attention, set goals and make plans, follow rules, solve problems, monitor actions, delay gratification, and control impulses. Sound familiar? Sound familiar? Absolutely key is that we think about how our current policies, whether it's you as organizations, whether it's you as systems that interface with people's lives, or whether it is in the big P policy being set by your governor and your legislature and those in elected positions. We've got to be thinking about how our policies do and don't, right? Create the opportunities for people to experience success, to believe there's futures they can influence, to give them opportunities to build these executive functioning skills, and to know that we don't have policies that are assuming skills and capabilities in people that simply have not yet been fully developed and realized. Greatest example, Detroit. I love this story in Detroit. The sheriff there in Detroit decided that one of the things that was happening was their biggest problem was recidivism. Duh. 70% of all the prison systems in this country, right? State by state by state. It's not new people creating with new crimes, it's recidivism, right? It's the churn. Same is true in your county jails. It's the churn. You want to drop expenses in the correction system? Drop recidivism. You want to drop recidivism? You got to start talking about some whole person treatment, and you've really got to be thinking differently. So the sheriff really started thinking about this, and he was working with the School of Social Work, wonderful schools of social work, nothing better than these strong university partners and relationships. And this sheriff wanted to do that, and he realized, as he was thinking about this science, because he had gotten informed by this science, and he realized that what had happened is in their intake process, from the very minute people walked into that jail to be booked, was an adversarial system. Adversarial system, both in the physical appearance, both in terms of the way in which people were treated, in terms of the way in which they felt any sense of dignity, of honor, of respect of any kind whatsoever. This sheriff completely changed, helping with the School of Social Work's help, completely changed the whole intake process of people coming into the jail. And what they found was that people were going into the jail far less adversarial themselves, a lot less difficulties in the jail population itself. But what they found is that people were much more open to what they needed to get working on and doing in order to keep from revolving back through that door. Child welfare, down in Florida. There is an agency down in Florida now working with the state, Child Protective Services, that before that investigator knocks on that door for the very first time to investigate abuse and neglect, standing right alongside them is an in-home child practitioner, family preservation practitioner, working with the family from the minute that door opens to reduce the adversarial nature of the experience. Because what you'll know from the ACE science, what you'll know as you study executive function, is that the minute you put people in an adversarial situation, they are in the state of fight or flight. They are in the state of hypervigilance and protection. And you're going to learn more about this today, but we've got to think about it in our policies, right? Whether it's child welfare. My son is a vice principal in a choice school in the inner city of Milwaukee. You want to talk about tough work? Bless his heart. 31 years old and committing his life's work to wanting to make sure that all children are on pathways for educational success. And one of the things that he realized, as he too has been thinking about this ACE science and this toxic stress science, and realizing who are these young people that he's working with every day as vice principal, especially on a disciplinary standpoint, and completely changing his disciplinary practices, realizing that what he was doing was more harmful than helpful, and what he was doing was not helping these youth to exercise these skills of executive function, because he kept them in this state of hypervigilance, right, through this adversarial nature of the best of intentions that oftentimes our systems do. And lastly, if we are going to talk about policy, if we are going to talk about truly infusing, aligning, and accelerating this science across our systems to truly have that healthier capital district that we all want to have. And I'm convinced, folks, please know in this room, I am not here just talking to you about social services. I am here talking to you today about the economic vitality of the state of New York. And if you are going to have a healthy and prosperous state, it simply can't be done without this kind of investment and change around what it's going to take to truly have a healthy people, a healthy population. But we can't get this done with our current financing model. I remember out in Washington State, I was at a conference, and Jack Shonkoff was talking, and Rob Anda was there, one of the fathers of the ACE science, and the question in the room is, what's holding us back? Why can't we really move this? And I looked at everybody and I said, we've got a failed financing model. We've got a failed financing model. In the height of the Great Recession, when we were cutting right and left in the state of Washington, like I know you were here too, at any point along the way, had I wanted to go out and build a new juvenile justice institution, which I did not want to do, I could have gone to the capital side of the budget, and I could have gotten financing and paid it back over a period of time, and I could have built a new juvenile justice institution in a separate side of the budget, right? We have no capital funding mechanism for the work that we're talking about here. In order to get this done, it is truly going to take some of these notions of pay for success, collective impact. It's truly going to take this notion that we're going to have to create new ways in which we're going to finance this work, because the point in time grant in, grant out work, the things that I had to cut first were the things that everybody in this room said mattered the most. The prevention, the earlier intervention, the things that we know works. Because our current public sector financing strategy does not work in relationship to the kinds of outcomes and impacts that we say we're trying to achieve. So it does require us to think differently about how, what I call, we got to turn that ship. There's got to be a way that we as a nation can figure out how to put an infusion of front-end dollars into our systems over a period of time to get these results, and as those savings are realized, put it back into that front end of the system. But we have no way to turn that ship without an infusion of new dollars, and a difference and a change in the way in which we're spending existing dollars, right, in order to get this done. So how do we do this? I keep saying, everybody in this room is a leader. I wish I could tell you that there was just this one magic easy pill, but I can't. Because this is about moving from program thinking to systems change thinking. This is about recognizing that everybody in this room is a policy leader, big P, little p. Everybody in this room individually, either as a clinician, as a leader of an organization, as a leader of a system, as a leader of any field or discipline that intersects in the lives of real people in real ways every day. Today, listen to this science and think about how you, when you leave here, can infuse it, can align it, and can accelerate it individually and collectively as a community. Have that vision for a healthy capital district. Dare to articulate what it looks like, dare to articulate how you would measure it, and share governance, share accountability, share responsibility for getting it done individually and collectively as a community. So that was my job here today, to kick things off, and I hope I've been able to help you out with this. I want to thank you. I just remind you all, for whatever reasons you are all here today, and you are stewards for a time. And I think history is going to look back and ask us whether or not we seized this moment to think anew about larger impact, about larger population change, and a healthy capital district begins with healthy people. Thank you very much. Sure. A few questions. Anything I said that challenge? I always go into this work and say we don't all have to agree, but we are at a time of some real change, so I'd just love to hear any questions you might have. Please. Okay, so the Harvard Center for the Developing Child is where you want to go. The one article that I referred to was Dr. Jack Shonkoff, and it was in Spotlight on Poverty, was where that was written in. I think that's what I was referring to, right? Does that help? Any questions, any comments on anything that I said?
Could you say more about how you aligned ACEs contractually?
So contractually, what does this mean? So let me give you let me see if I can come up with some specific examples. Okay, I'm not going to give my own example. I want to give a couple of examples that I shared with you. So the FIRST program, F-I-R-S-T, the FIRST program in Florida that I was referring to, and I've got all the data here. I just didn't want to go into it into much minutia with y'all. But the FIRST program is contractually done by the child welfare system with an organization called Neighbor to Family. And basically, as I said before, they're realizing that with the ACE science, what you'll know as you guys get into this more and more, and I'm sure many people here are more expert at it than I am, but the higher those ACEs, the more likely you've got a hyperactivation of the amygdala, a thwarting of that executive function development, that prefrontal cortex, right? And so what they realized is they had to start bringing down the adversarial nature of their CPS system. Because remember, most families that come into contact with your child protective system have incredible strengths, dreams, desires, hopes, aspirations for themselves and their families, and 70% is neglect, as I said before. So what they needed to do was bring that adversarial nature of that experience, right? So that would be an example of contractually. Now, the CPS system, you would say, well, that's new money. Yeah, it was. But what the CPS system would tell you is they're keeping more children safely at home with services, having more success with parents. Parents are immediately getting involved with services. What does the research tell us in child welfare? If you remove a child from a home and you don't get them back within that first 90 to 120 days, the chances of that happening, right, get diminished every day after that. So reducing that adversarial nature of the system contractually is important. One more example, Medicaid. So I had Medicaid responsibility in Washington State, and I tell you, I don't know who these actuaries are, but I think they sit in some cloud somewhere. I never got to see their faces, but boy, they sure had control over me. And so I had the Children's Hospital of Seattle, the chief medical director, come to see me. And he said, we were talking about Triple P, the positive parenting program, right? Absolutely, if you look at the research that's come out of the state of North Carolina, unbelievable in terms of the impact of Triple P, positive parenting program, not just on health outcomes, right? But you'll see the outcomes all along in child welfare and juvenile justice and behavioral health and people getting jobs and keeping jobs. Because really, at the end of the day, when you look at the positive parenting program, it's about authentic engagement. It's about building these executive function skills. It really is when you really get down and study it. So he came to me and showed me this research and said, we would like to be able to do the first couple phases of Triple P in pediatricians' offices. So just like pediatricians can apply dental sealants, they felt that the first 2 phases, Triple P comes in 5 phases, the first 2 phases of it could be done in a pediatrician's office, and we could get much better earlier intervention in emerging behavioral health issues of kids. Made all the sense in the world to me. The research was clear. I sent it off to the actuaries. There it goes. Because everything's going to have to be scored, right? And I was under very strict orders from my governor, spend no more money, right? I mean, we were cutting right and left at the time. Well, this is what the actuaries came back. Great idea. No question in their minds that this would long-term be a cost saver for the Medicaid program. But because we were running in 2-year budget cycles, it was going to increase expenditures before we were going to see the decrease. This is what I talked about before about the failed financing model that we have. But yet, no doubt in my mind, the implementation, now Washington State has since taken off all, on the behavioral health side, they've taken off all limits on the number of behavioral health visits. So they're implementing true parity out there, and I'm very proud of that. But also moving on Triple P, as we were talking about back then. But that's another example of budget alignment that I wasn't able to get done because it would have increased expenditures in order to decrease expenditures over time. And this happens time and time and time again. I saw another.
Susan. Thank you. You mentioned data sharing across systems, and I think that's always a conundrum for folks who are trying to work collaboratively. And you mentioned that you had some success in finding ways around the HIPAA rules. Can you point towards any written any publications or any way to access some of the examples of that success?
Yeah, there's some really great examples, and I'll be happy to share this with folks. There's great examples at local community levels, counties. There's great examples at the state level. So for instance, I had a database in Washington State across 26 different data sets. So if there was a fact situation on an individual person, we were able to look at them and all members of that household across all those domains to have a common client index. The one thing that I would tell you that's really important here on data sharing is to know that you can do it. That with MOUs, especially on the education side, boy, I'll tell you, that is a critical piece, is having those MOUs with your education system. One of the things that we did that was so successful is using data analytics, as I said before, and geo-mapping. We basically identified our multi-system families. 11% of my families were driving 42% of all my expenditures, right? That's true here. 5% of your Medicaid recipients are driving 50% of your costs. That's true here too. But what we found was when we identified our multi-system involved families and our lowest performing schools, what do you think the geo-mapping did? Just like that. So then I went and I sat down with those schools and I showed them the data, and this is what I did. And this is what you've got to do too, because you're all policymakers. And you're all leaders. As I looked at them and I laid out the data, and I didn't say to them, now these are the programs and services that we have, and this is what I'm willing to do for you. I looked at them and I just simply said one thing: what do you need? What do you need? Because our state is successful when you're successful. I know every child at that time, I could tell you at the point of Medicaid at birth, those kids that were on pathways to not graduate successfully from school. And yet you cut your state's number of kids that aren't graduating successfully from high school, we are talking real economic development. We are talking real tax revenues, right? But it came down to this data sharing. And it can be done. But what I had to keep doing with the lawyers, and I'm married to a judge, so I've got a daughter as an attorney too. I love them all dearly. But I kept looking at the lawyers and saying, show me where it says that. You're a lawyer, God love you. Show me where it says that. And you just have to keep pushing, because I found 9 times out of 10, there was a way under, around, over, and through these barriers we put up to data sharing while still honoring confidentiality for people. One more, and then I'm done.
So this question is towards program development, implementation, as well as grant writing. How do we encourage quality versus quantity mindsets? And how do we write strengths-based grant proposals towards deficit-based mindsets?
Okay, Susan, good. Nail this one, and we're really in good shape.
So here's what I'd say, is that first of all, there's an advocacy responsibility that you have first, and that is, as I said before, if you're going to align this stuff to budget and contract, the people who have the ultimate responsibility for those budgets and contracts are going to have their thinking changed, right? They're going to have their thinking changed. So the first thing I'd tell you is be an educator. Be someone that is educating policymakers. Get legislators out in the field with you. Get the governor's staff out in the field with you. You've got to turn on that education engine, because people don't know what they don't know. And you're not going to be able to write the kind of grants that you're wanting to write if what people are looking for, right, is something very different. So the first thing I'd say, and this is where that leadership really kicks in, is don't just otherize this and say, well, I can't do it because they're not changing. You're going to have to go out and work hard. That's what I think is the beauty of this convening, is everybody sharing that collective sense of responsibility. But the other thing I'd say to you is don't give up. Don't give up. This notion of being strengths-based you now have science backing you up, that if we want to achieve the outcomes we say we want for a healthy capital district, you aren't going to get there without the alignment of this science. And what this science will tell you time and time again is the authentic engagement, being person, family-centered, strengths-based, seeing the whole child within the context of family, within the context of community, is the only way you're going to see our path forward. But you're going to have to educate people and help them to see that. I have found time and time again that when people understand the science, amazing things happen. Amazing things happen. But we don't know what we don't know. And so you all have a role to play here, and that's why today starts with this role of education, this role of leadership, and this role of practice and policy alignment.
Well, we really want to thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Just stay right here for a second.
Are we going to sing? Are we going to dance?
Yeah, what do we got?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a lot of kids. I'm sure you got some soft shoe. And you told me this morning, gymnast, and I'm not going to do a back handspring with you, Susan. I'm going to tell you that. Not off the stage or anything either. Look, we've the Alliance for Children and Families is a terrific national association that Susan is CEO and chair of, and I've known her for 10, 12 years now, and known her as she's moved through different responsibilities and has come back home to this business again. There's over 500 members in the Alliance around the United States, and it's growing fast. It's really looking to become not the voice of the members. This is not it's a member-driven organization. I mean, LaSalle School is a member, and many of the organizations here in the Capital District are. But it's really a voice for children and families, poverty eradication, the kinds of things that we're talking about. And to the members, Susan, I said last night, it's a real pain in the butt because she sees nothing valuable that's within your reach. If it's currently within your reach, you're doing that, and if you're not doing it, shape up. What we really need to be thinking about is what is beyond our reach and not easily grasped. Not the low-hanging fruit is gone. And she pushes us. And to be a member of the Alliance is to really be a member of a learning organization and otherwise. And I'm not making that pitch. I don't care about membership. We got plenty of things to do. But I was, really pleased to be on the board of the Alliance for several years. And what a great experience and what a national voice you are, Susan. And we really appreciate it. And to help us, the reason I stepped in here is she's on her way down to the Capitol now. We've made arrangements for her to meet with Governor Cuomo's staff on a couple of things. So we're getting a little work out of her. And we have to move on.